Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, and in today's video I am going to be looking at AMD and Intel's CPU offering and give you an outlook so you can decide for yourself which side to go with for your next PC build. My name is Palchin and let's start the video. Now I did a whole another video talking about the Intel's new lineup of Comet Lake desktop CPUs and discussed about it in detail. So make sure you go ahead and check that out. I will be leaving the link down in the description as well. And this video is going to be a little longer, that's why I will be providing with the timestamps as well, so you can skip ahead if you'd like. Just sit back, relax and enjoy the video. If you're looking for the best gaming CPU or the best CPU for desktop applications, there are only two choices to pick from, AMD and Intel. And it has become hard to give an unbiased opinion and recommendation in recent times. But in many cases, the answer is actually very clear. In fact, for most users, it's a blowout win in AMD's favor. Now that's an amazing reversal of fortunes for the chip maker after it teetered on the edge of bankruptcy a mere 3 years ago, making its turnaround even more impressive as it continues to challenge Intel that enjoyed a decade of dominance. Pricing is the most important consideration for almost everyone, as it's the factor that's going to decide which brand you're going to go for and what variant from the lineup you're going to pick. And AMD is generally hard to beat in the value department. The company offers a plethora of advantages over Intel, like its bundle coolers for instance, and full overclockability feature on most models. Not to mention the complementary software that includes precision boost overdrive auto overclocking feature. And with AMD, you also benefit from the broad compatibility of motherboards with the AM4 CPU socket that support both forward and backward compatibility, ensuring that not only do you get the most bang for your processor buck, but also your motherboard investment. Now, Intel does include bundle cooler with its non-overclocking SKUs, as you have to pay more to overclock, but they are flimsy and just good enough at best. We've seen cases where Intel stock coolers don't even provide full performance at stock settings. They certainly aren't comparable to AMD's standard fare. And to top that, Intel doesn't even throw in a cooler at all for its pricey overclockable K-series SKUs. That is the unlocked version of the Core i3, i5, i7 and i9 processor, like the i9 10900K and i7 10700K, so on and so forth. So make sure to budget in a cooler, and a beefy one at that, if you are planning on overclocking an Intel processor. Meanwhile, most of AMD's bundle coolers are suitable for at least moderate overclocking, so you don't have to arrange a beefy cooler right off the bat if you want to run some minor overclocks on the processor. Now, Intel did bulk up its bundle coolers for several Comet Lake S models, but the aesthetics and the slight thermal improvements aren't enough to match AMD's competitive coolers, and they aren't even available on all models. Intel not only charges a premium for its overclockable K-series chips, but you'll also need to shell out for a pricey Z-series motherboard for the privilege of tuning your processor, as Intel doesn't allow overclocking on B or H series motherboards, which are the budget offering and the majority of the people usually go for in the first place. And Intel also has a long history of rapid socket transitions, meaning the odds of dropping a new chip into your existing motherboard or taking the older process over to a newer motherboard aren't as high. Therefore, the moment a new Intel chips come out, your motherboard will go right into the garbage disposal. You'll also miss out on PCIe 4.0 connectivity, as Intel still remains mired on the PCIe 3.0 bus that offers half the transfer speed of AMD's PCIe 4.0 connection. While AMD offers the most bang for your hard-earned dollar or rupees, as with any type of product, you can still expect to pay a premium for the utmost performance, in particular the Ryzen 9 3950X, which is their top-of-the-line desktop chip. Intel has long enjoyed a commanding performance lead over AMD processors in many metrics. Still, even though the company continues to charge a premium, its days of clear-cut performance leadership have largely come to an end. Therefore, as of right now, the win goes to AMD. When you're comparing AMD and Intel CPUs, Team Red has a compelling value story across the full breadth of its product stack, especially when we take performance per dollar or rupees into account. In the AMD versus Intel CPU battle, Intel still barely holds the edge in per core performance, meaning it offers really snappy performance in lightly threaded scenarios and applications that don't scale well with core and thread counts, and that includes most games. However, AMD holds the lead in a few critical price bands, particularly right in the middle of its stack. And the benchmarks show that AMD's gaming performance is no slouch either. Intel holds the ultimate in gaming performance with its most expensive desktop processor, the Core i9-10900K. However, the performance delta between Intel and AMD's comparably priced chips often isn't worth the premium, at least for the vast majority of enthusiasts. You'd be hard pressed to notice the small difference in gaming performance at the top of the AMD versus Intel stack. But things are more complicated in the mid-range. Referring back to the previous category, pricing is the ultimate measuring factor, and AMD pulls off a few key wins in the mid-range where most of us shop. But Intel's Core i5-10600K serves up a compelling lead in its price bracket, making it the most attractive gaming chip for around $260. I expect most builds in the mid-range to come with lesser GPUs, which generally serves as an equalizer in terms of CPU performance, as no one with an i5 or Ryzen 5 will hook their PCs up with the high-end graphics card like the RTX 2080 Ti. That's just ridiculous if anyone out there is doing that. It's also noteworthy that AMD often provides more cores and threads at any given price point, so there's less of a chance of utterly erratic performance if you're running chat clients, web browsers, and other tasks in the background while gaming. If you're into game streaming, AMD is almost always the best choice due to its healthy ratio of cores and threads, which Intel is unable to provide at the moment. Just keep in mind that you should always buy the best GPU that you can afford, provided your CPU can push it along at full speed, because it's often the bottleneck, meaning that your CPU should be powerful enough to utilize the full capabilities of your GPU. Do your research before picking either of the two. Heck, you are already at the right place, so why don't you consider subscribing to my channel? I'll make sure that my viewers, that is you, are always aware about the best components in the market. And with this, the round goes to Intel, but only because of the absolute top performance it provides. If you're a gaming fanatic that prizes every single last frame you can squeeze out, particularly if you're into overclocking, Intel is your answer on the high end. That leading edge performance will also pay off if you plan to upgrade your GPU soon. Just plan to pay for the privilege, that's what I'm saying. You'll find that AMD is often the best option in the mid-range, and unless you're running a maxed out rig with the faster GPUs paired with low resolution high refresh monitors, you won't even notice the slim gaming performance increase with the Intel CPUs. In the non-gaming performance battle of AMD versus Intel CPUs, the picture is a lot clearer. AMD's chips take the outright win in terms of the ultimate performance in threaded productivity and content creation applications. AMD's copious slathering of cores, threads, and cache on its processors also equates to a big win in the performance per money value category. Intel's trouble moving forward toward denser process nodes has left it behind in the core count race, and now AMD has offerings on both the high-end desktops and mainstream desktop that Intel simply can't match. Consider this, AMD has a 16-core Ryzen 9 3950X for the mainstream desktop that offers far more cores and threads than Intel's most powerful Core i9-10900K. Meanwhile, AMD's Ryzen Threadripper 3990X comes with an insane 64 cores and 128 threads for the high-end desktop category. That's a 3.5 times advantage in core counts over Intel's Halo high-end desktop models. AMD's chips offer far more performance on both the mainstream desktop and high-end desktop platforms, so they are also more expensive than Intel's respective flagships. You don't need to drop major bucks to see the advantages of AMD's chips though. In terms of cores and threads, notwithstanding the X3 series, AMD offers more for less at every single price range. Those extra cores equate to big performance wins in almost every type of threaded workload like rendering and video processing. Therefore, winner AMD for professionals on the hunt for performance in content creation and productivity applications. The winner of AMD versus Intel CPUs is a pretty one-sided affair. AMD's lack of integrated graphics on its 6 core and above CPUs means you'll have to stick with Intel if you want to build a rig without dedicated graphics, but most professionals will want a dedicated graphics card regardless. When comparing AMD versus Intel CPU power and heat, the former 7nm process node makes a huge difference. Power consumption comes as a byproduct of design choices, like its architecture for instance. However, higher power consumption often correlates to more heat generation, so you'll need beefier coolers to offset the heat output of greedier chips. Intel has improved its 14nm processes to strengthen its power to performance ratio by more than 70% in the 5 long years it's been on the market. But it's no coincidence that Intel's latest chips are known for higher power consumption and heat. That's because Intel has had to turn the power dial up further with each generation of chips to provide more performance as it fends off the resurgent AMD. That leads to problems with some stock coolers and also requires robust power delivery on your motherboard. Those factors combine to make Intel a notorious power guzzler. In contrast, AMD has had the benefit of 7nm node which is more efficient than Intel's 14nm. AMD does lose some of that advantage in its Ryzen 3000 series processors due to a large central 14nm I/O die that comes as a part of the package. Still, in aggregate, AMD's 7nm chips either consume less power or provide much better power to performance efficiency. As a result, you'll get more work done per watt of energy consumed, which is a win-win. And AMD's cooling requirements aren't nearly as overbearing. So the winner here is AMD. In judging AMD versus Intel CPU performance per watt, it's impossible to overstate the importance of having the densest process node paired with an efficient microarchitecture. And TSMC's 7nm and AMD's Zen 2 are the winning combination. The latest Ryzen processors consume less power on a performance versus power basis, which in turn equates to less heat generation that eases cooling requirement. There's no debate when you compare AMD versus Intel CPU overclocking. Intel offers the most overclocking headroom, meaning you can gain more performance over the baseline speed with Intel chips that you can with AMD's Ryzen processors. As mentioned, you'll have to pay a premium for Intel's K-series chips and purchase a pricey Z-series motherboard, not to mention splurge on a capable aftermarket cooler, preferably liquid, to unlock the best of Intel's overclocking prowess. However, once you have the necessary parts, Intel's chips are relatively easy to push to their max, which often tops out at over 5 GHz on all cores with the 10th gen Comet Lake processors. AMD doesn't have as much room for manual tuning. In fact, the maximum achievable all-core overclocks often fall a few hundred megahertz beneath the chip's maximum single-core clock boost. That means all-core overclocking can actually result in losing performance in lightly threaded applications, albeit a minor amount. Part of this disparity stems from AMD's tactic of binning its chips to allow some cores to boost much higher than others in tandem with AMD's precision boost, an innovative thread targeting technique that pegs lightly threaded workloads to the fastest cores. AMD exposes near overclocked performance right out of the box that results in less overclocking headroom. That is, there is not much left to push the processors beyond. However, AMD offers its Precision Boost Overdrive, a one-click auto overclocking feature that will bring some extra performance out of your chip based on its capabilities, your motherboard's power delivery subsystem, and your CPU cooling. AMD's approach provides the best performance possible with your choice of components and is generally hassle-free. In either case, you still won't achieve the high frequencies you'll see with Intel processors, but you do get a free performance boost. And the win here goes to Intel. When it comes to AMD versus Intel CPU overclocking, Team Blue has far more headroom and much higher attainable frequencies. Just be prepared to pay for the privilege. AMD's approach is friendlier to entry-level users, rewarding them with hassle-free overclocking based on the capabilities of their system. But you don't get as much performance, but then again, you aren't paying that much to begin with. AMD's relentless onslaught with its Zen-based processor has redefined our expectations for both the mainstream desktop and the high-end desktop market, catching Intel flat-footed as it remains mired on the 14nm process and Skylake architectures. The past several years have seen AMD CPUs go from value-focused and power-hungry solutions to leading-edge designs that deliver more cores, more performance, and lower power requirements. Intel has fought back by slowly adding features and cores across its product stack, but that has also resulted in negative side effects, like more power consumption and heat generation. These only serve to highlight the company's struggle on the design and fabrication side of its operation. The AMD versus Intel CPU conversation is changing as Intel lowers pricing on its mainstream lineup, but it still hasn't eased its draconian segmentation policies that limit features like overclockability to pricey chips and motherboards. Intel's tactics of squeezing every penny out of every feature has allowed AMD to offer a more compelling value story across the full breadth of the consumer desktop CPU market. Though that comes with the noteworthy and new caveat that the Ryzen XT series of processor isn't worth the premium for the overwhelming majority of users. Aside from a misstep in the value department with its Ryzen XT series, AMD has the top-notch performance to match its value story and create a solid price to performance ratio. Intel holds the leadership position in per core performance, which also grants it a leading position in the gaming market, and that advantage now extends down to the lower portion of its product stack. However, due to price cuts of its own, AMD does the most damage down in the high volume mid-range where it is far more competitive. That's an amazing reversal of fortunes for a company that teetered on the brink of bankruptcy a mere 3 years ago. AMD still has some work to do as it expands its ecosystem of OEM partners and works with the community to broaden software optimization for its chips. Still, given the great mix of price, performance, and value, AMD is already in a good spot. Intel still holds sway with the innumerable customers that don't use a discrete GPU, especially in the high volume OEM market. So it has some time to try to wrest back the crown. The company's Comet Lake processors have helped short up Intel's defenses in the critical mid-range, but as we've seen, AMD isn't sitting still. So AMD wins the CPU war overall right now, but depending on your needs, an Intel processor could still be the better choice. If you want the best in overclocking, gaming or software support, or if you want productivity performance without buying a discrete GPU, Team Blue has the advantage. But if you want the best balance of price and performance, Team Red certainly deserves your money. And that pretty much wraps things up. Thank you for watching my video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.